Hello everyone and welcome back to another UseTech Hustle video. In this one we're going to be taking a look at a card from way back in 2012, the Radeon HD7850. The card we're looking at specifically today is from Asus and it's the 2GB GDDR5 version, and yeah, it's something I was able to pick up for very cheap. I think I paid just over £20 including postage. Just was interested to see exactly what it could do so many years down the line. Despite its age, this mid-range card at the time was able to pack quite a punch and offered some very good specification, which is certainly still usable in this day and age. This is also true for the connectivity, as it offers DisplayPort, HDMI and 2 DVI outputs, so pretty much everything you want for a standard modern monitor. If we now take a deeper look at the specification, you'll see it has a core clock of 870MHz, the VRAM is 2GB of GDDR5 running at 4840MHz. The maximum resolution, however, is not going to reach 4K, it's going to give you 2560 by 1600, and that's via the HDMI or DVI output. The recommended PSU size, being one of the older hungry beasts, is at least 500 watts, so bear that in mind, and you will need a 6-pin connector if you are looking at getting one of these. Now admittedly, although I picked one of these up just as a cheap graphics card for a cheap old gaming system and just something I wanted to take a look at, see if it's usable in this day and age, I did actually end up getting two of these. As you can see, they ended up being completely identical models, and one of them was provided with a box and also came with a Crossfire cable, so I figured I might as well do something I've never done before and see how these things perform when stuck together. So that's exactly what I did. To start with, I popped one of these bad boys into my X58 system, which, if you're not aware, is a X5675 clocked at 4.5 GHz. And after running all my usual benchmarking tests, I decided to double things up and stick the second unit in and see if this would improve things at all. Now, I should point out I was able to overclock these slightly on both the single and Crossfire configurations, so I was able to get things to 930MHz on the core and 1300 on the RAM. Now, as much as I would love to be able to push things a little bit further, the heat was getting quite bad, and therefore the fan noise, as well as the fact that they were so close together, I wasn't able to split them further apart, so I didn't want to kind of do any damage to either of them, and really I thought this was an adequate overclock for what we're doing today. Anyway, with all that being said, let's take a look at the benchmarks. So let's kick things off with the recent Doom update. As you can see with these benchmarks, we've got the single GPU on the left and the Crossfire on the right, and if you look you can see the actual performance of the Crossfire is in fact lower. We're getting a slightly lower FPS average with ever so slightly lower lows of 1% and 0.1%, and unfortunately this seems to be a bit of a trend which you'll see in other items on this list, as this does appear to be the start of a trend we're going to see going forward through these benchmarks. Having said that, as you'll see with City Skylines here, the actual averages etc. were improved ever so slightly in Crossfire mode. The game ran very smoothly, which is to be expected I suppose, being it's getting on a bit now, and yeah, it didn't seem to benefit too much from being in Crossfire. However, as you can see, there were some slight improvements. Moving on to CSGO, and interestingly, despite my terrible gameplay, you'll see on the high preset the overall average was a little bit less in the Crossfire, however it was more stable, offering nearly double the 1% lows and a much smoother 0.1%. So although this is a bit niche, we're not going to see things like this throughout the rest of the tests, this was interesting to see. Crisis 2 up next on the Ultra preset, and as you can see this is one of the few games which benefits from a Crossfire setup. The FPS does drop down slightly on the averages, ever so slightly just under 40 FPS, but you'll see it's a lot more stable with 1% lows and 0.1% lows being marginally higher. So I suppose this is, if you're looking to play this old game and have two of these cards knocking around, then brilliant. Otherwise, yeah, just stick with the one. GTA 5 now, which really does show, if the developers decided to support such setups, that Crossfire can really benefit things. As you can see, with two cards stuck together on mixed, leaning towards high settings, the Crossfire setup was able to achieve over double the FPS of the single card, which, albeit still playable. But yeah, as you can see, the averages are just under 100 FPS with considerably better lows. Pretty damn impressive, I suppose. It's just a shame that so few games support it. Continuing with the positive vibes, we've got Rise of the Tomb Raider next, which was still very playable with a single card, as you can see, with an average of just over 30, but this doubled when using the dual card setup, with much better lows and things as well, so yeah, another one for the tick list. Taking a look at the Division now, you can see this one also benefited in the average department with the Crossfire setup. However, it did seem a little less stable with slightly worse 1% and 0.1% figures. However, considering it's an old card and this is quite a graphically intensive game, both were still very playable indeed. Now here with Battlefield 1, as you can see, things start to really poop the bed from the Crossfire setup. The lows took a suffering, and it was quite stuttery in some areas, and the average is just generally a little bit worse with two cards. It still was quite playable in both, so I wouldn't say it was a massive hindrance, but considering the outlay and the power this thing's using, this game really did not like it at all. One of my favourites now, which is Dirt 3. Now yep, this is an older title, but as you can see, it absolutely ate up the Crossfire setup for breakfast. The averages were an awful lot better, reaching just over 150 FPS, and the 0.1% lows and 1% lows were very, very solid indeed. Considering this is one of my favourite games as well, it was nice to see it running so damn well. It's just a shame this isn't replicated on many other games. Now, amazingly, for such an old card, both the single and Crossfire setups actually played Apex Legends. However, due to the VRAM limitations, it was only on the lower settings, and interestingly enough, despite them being in Crossfire, the game did not recognise the 4GB of VRAM and didn't really let me use it. However, as you can see, even in the single card setup, the averages are very, very good with just over 60 FPS, and there's not really much difference in it. Both of them seem to run identically as if the extra card isn't there. Taking a look at Mafia III now, this one I never really expected to do well in any setup really, because it just seems so badly optimised. However, on low settings, as you can see, the single card did beat the Crossfire setup just about, with a slightly better average. I'd still consider them both to be playable. It's just a shame that a game which I think is actually pretty good just doesn't seem to be well optimised for any older hardware, or newer hardware it seems, as my 1070 doesn't run it as well as you might think. Let's move on to Dirt Rally now. I know this isn't the latest one, but it's what I've got and it's still a cracking game. This is also one that was able to benefit from a Crossfire setup, giving us nearly a double performance boost. The averages are 92.4 with the Crossfire setup versus just over 50 with the single card. However, in both cases it's quite stable as well, with very good 1% and 0.1% lows. Moving our attention to PUBG next, and this is one which goes back to norm and simply doesn't like having a Crossfire setup at all. As you can see, it took a slight performance hit, and yeah, really considering how optimised this game has been for recent setups, having such an old Crossfire setup doesn't really surprise me that it hinders things here. Either way though, both of them I would say are reasonably playable, especially the single card performance, and if you just drop the settings, maybe the resolution, you could push this even further. Project Cars 2 now, and this is again one which seemed to suffer when another card was present. The single card performed quite well, I would say, with an average of just over 54 frames a second. The lows did seem to drop down quite a bit. As you can see, it's 2.4 FPS. However, this didn't really translate into the gameplay. It did feel quite smooth. But looking at the Crossfire setup, as you can see, the frame rate is just an awful lot worse, and it did feel quite choppy to be fair, so definitely not a game I'd recommend. If you're looking to run a Crossfire setup, that is.
Still not sure why we're looking for this temple.
One of my favourite games now from Humble Bundle, which I would suggest if you haven't got to sign up, you do get some quality items on there. Vermintide II on the medium preset was running really well on the single card, I thought, and just like Project Cars 2, adding another card seemed to tank it entirely. Just under 25 FPS, as you can see in the Crossfire setup. It did feel a bit choppy as well, so again, it's just something that's not able to harness the power of them both, and in this case it does actually hinder performance quite badly.
Oh, well, we're just biding our time, aren't we?
Finally, it's time for the obligatory look at Fortnite, and in both situations it ran perfectly fine. This is one of those games that if you are still playing it, you can get away with much old hardware like this, and the Crossfire would be totally pointless. So if you're looking at making a quick, cheap gaming PC to flip or something, and you can pick up one of these cards for cheap, being able to say that it can quite easily run Fortnite is definitely going to be a boon. So there it is, guys, that's my time with not only a single HD7850, but also two of them in Crossfire. Now my conclusion would be, for this card in particular, it is available very cheaply now, so if you can score one and you're looking to do some older gaming, or like I say, add a semi-decent older graphics card for a PC you want to flip, etc., then go for it. However, unless you're like me and another one stumbles onto your lap, I would definitely suggest to avoid cross-firing them. It's just not worth it, and the games which actually are improved by the performance are so few and far between, it's barely worth mentioning in my opinion. Anyway guys, I really hope you've enjoyed this review. I know it's been a bit different having a Crossfire setup, and hopefully in future I'll have the opportunity to do a few more, hopefully with maybe some more recent cards. Though, having done this, I'm not really expecting much from them. If you have enjoyed this, then do consider subscribing, that would be fantastic. Or even better, if you just want to stick a like on this, then that would be fantastic also. If you've got one of these cards, or just want to share your opinion, why not say something in the comments? I love hearing from you guys. With all that being said, thank you very much for watching. Keep hustling, guys.